Water. It turns the turbines that power our country, and it irrigates the fields that power our economy. In New Zealand, we seem to have loads of it, but do we? And can we rely on it being that plentiful in the future? This week, I'm discovering the answers to these questions by looking into science's crystal ball, modelling, and meeting the very young men revolutionising global irrigation. But first, I'm off to our biggest water user, Canterbury, where NIWA scientist Roddy Henderson is going to give me the lowdown on New Zealand's water situation. So what's the state of water in New Zealand?
Well, on average, we have a lot. We actually have about as much water falling on New Zealand as falls on the whole of Australia.
Is it?
In spite of the difference in our size.
Tiny size, but it's not spread evenly?
Indeed it isn't. In the mountains, about 70 or 80 kilometres in that direction, you can get as high as 12 metres in a year. Right here where we're standing, about 900 millimetres.
Yeah.
And in Christchurch, 600 millimetres.
This uneven distribution of rainfall is largely due to warm, water-laden air from the northwest hitting the mountains, where it is pushed upwards and cooled, dropping its cargo in vast quantities, which then rush into the great rivers of the west coast and the Canterbury Plains.
Canterbury is lucky in having major water sources that emerge from the Southern Alps, and the plains themselves are basically the outwash of the set of rivers that cross them. And there's quite a big distance between the major rivers, and all the space in between is outwash gravel from one or the other.
Agriculture accounts for 2/3 of all of New Zealand's exports and used an incredible 81% of our freshwater allocations in 2010. So our economy clearly needs water to grow and flourish. But how do we know how much water we can safely take?
So here we've basically got some trial instrument setups that we do to make sure. The role of science is to provide the information that allows decision makers to make decisions based on good data and interpretation.
So I've come to a good old Canterbury dairy farm, where NIWA have set up the gear that collects this information. But it's not just the powers that be that want to save water, but the farmer as well. So Craig, you've obviously given up some of your land for the research station. I mean, what do you get out of this?
Information's power. If we haven't got any information, then we're not going to go anywhere. So we'll be a lot more efficient with our water than what we have been in the past. We can look at graphs and track where the moisture levels are going in the soil, and then if we need to irrigate because the soil moisture levels are dropping, then we can just put some irrigation on to be able to fulfill that.
To illustrate the problem the farmers face, I've set up a wee experiment. This here is my miniature field. Up top, we've got the nice fertile topsoil, and underneath, the rocky ground. I've got a packet of powdered drink, which represents my fertiliser. So I put my fertiliser on my field. I'll put on quite a bit because we need a bit of fertiliser. And then comes the irrigation. Just a little bit. And you can see what happens is that the water draws the fertiliser into the topsoil, feeding and watering the grass. But if I put on too much, give it heaps, and it's going everywhere, it starts to soak through the topsoil into that rocking ground. And as you can see by the colour, taking with it the fertiliser and its nutrients. So instead of fertilising the field, you fertilise the groundwater and the rivers, which is not what you want. It's not what Craig wants either.
Water is one thing, but also the other thing is the nutrients we put on. We pay for both of those, so the last thing we want to do is see them disappear at the bottom. So that's a really good thing. It's really interesting. Generally, things that are good for the bottom line are also good for the environment.
So overwatering is bad for everyone, and bad management of our water resource can have far-reaching consequences.
From a purely selfish perspective, from New Zealand's point of view, the rest of the world, and certainly some of our major markets, are becoming very particular about the way in which producers treat the environment. And if we aren't being seen to be careful with our environment, then we are risking our markets.
So what can we do to manage it better?
Well, we need to understand its distribution in space and time, and we have a pretty good handle on that. And then we need to have some modelling capabilities that allow us to predict what will happen under new scenarios, and climate change is one of those.
Computer models are science's crystal balls, but they provide more than a window to the future. They allow us to ask, what if? What if we change our actions? How will that change the future?
One of NIWA's clairvoyants is Daniel Collins.
In order for planners and policymakers to better shape what they do, they come to us to ask us what might happen in 2040 or 2090, what could happen. Now the best way to get at the answer is to wait, but they don't want to wait. And we need to anticipate things as best we can. And so we use these models to try and get at the answer.
One organisation that didn't want to wait was Environment Waikato, who asked Daniel to find out how bad flooding might get in the Waikato Basin.
It's anticipated that a bunch of forest will be converted to pasture for grazing dairy cows. When you cut down trees and you replace it with grassland, you can actually increase the chance of flooding. So they asked us how large the floods might become if some scenario of forest conversion were to happen.
So Daniel set about building his model.
You've got to start off with information. You've got to start off with data somehow. We need the spatial information, land cover, we needed soil maps and so forth.
With the landscape of his model established, he could feed in the information from real rainstorms. He had measurements of how much water flowed through the river. He also had rain gauge measurements, but had to translate them into usable data.
I'm going to show you how Daniel calculates the amount of rain that's fallen in a catchment. This area here represents my catchment, which I've split into 9 different areas, each with its own rain gauge. This here is going to be my rainstorm, so all I need to do is turn on my storm. We'll do that for about 10 seconds, it's a pretty short storm. And then pick a rain gauge and measure the amount of rain that's fallen. So that's 8 mil. I do a few sums. I know that my square is 470 by 470 mil times the 8 millimeters of rain. That's approximately 1.77 litres of water fallen into this square here. And that's what Daniel calls a data product.
Once Daniel has made data products for his whole catchment, he can feed them into his model and see if the river flows that it predicts are similar to the real river flows that were actually recorded.
If it does not look like the flows that we've observed, then something's wrong. And so we alter some of these parameters. We tweak them until we get a set of parameters that produces flows that look real. We think we've represented reality well and we can move forward. We can then use it to ask questions. We can ask what if questions. What if we have land use change?
What Daniel and his model discovered was that much of the land in the Waikato Basin is quite porous and can absorb a lot of water. So clearing forest from these areas, rather than areas with less porous soil, would mitigate the flood risk.
While Daniel was looking at how deforestation might affect floods, another NIWA modeller, Anthony Clark, was looking at how New Zealand's water would be affected by the biggest issue of our generation, climate change.
What's happened in New Zealand since about 2005, we have seen a shift to more frequent and severe droughts in that time compared to what we've experienced in the previous 20 years.
To figure out what was going on, Anthony first studied how New Zealand's rainfall looked to be affected by the global trends in climate change that have been established by huge international studies.
Generally, what we start to see happen to the globe's climate is it changes structure, takes on what we call a more tropical type structure.
As we can see, the global trend is for large bands of wetter weather around the equator and the poles, whilst the tropical areas are getting much drier. So how does New Zealand fare?
Old Aussie looks like it's in for a bit of a hard time, but we look pretty good.
If you look really hard at New Zealand,
Kind of got to squint a bit, eh?
Yeah, you see the South Island sticks right down in this zone where we think it's going to wet, but the North Island does touch this drying zone.
So more droughts for the North Island and more rain for the South? It's not that simple, says Anthony.
It's really about the interplay between the global climate system and our local climate systems. New Zealand's got its own unique story to tell.
So Anthony built a model that predicts the outcomes of this interplay. These maps show the expected rainfall change from 2030 to 2090. Because of the uncertainty involved, he has modelled the most optimistic expectations and the most pessimistic.
You go from projections of a little bit of change and some areas being more exposed, particularly the north and the south, right down to quite catastrophic change.
That's a pretty extreme case.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's pretty scary, that sort of stuff.
Real scary.
In Anthony's model, the North Island gets drier, as the global study predicted, but it's the east of the South Island that throws up a surprise. Anthony expects it to get drier, while the global study predicted more rainfall. How could this happen?
People quite often talk in New Zealand about this factor called the dreaded nor'wester. Air being pushed up against the Southern Alps, moisture falling out of it, and not a lot of moisture making it over the range onto the Canterbury plain. We start to see that become a little bit more frequent.
So it's just that the mountains catching all the rain and none's getting over to the plains.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's exacerbating an existing local climate process.
You're going to get some grumpy farmers.
So the weather systems that currently bring rain to Canterbury will be overpowered by the increasing dominance of the drying nor'wester. So in the future, it looks like Canterbury farms will be even more reliant on irrigation.
One of the key outcomes, one of the key bits of advice spinning off a report like this is we need to get on top of management of Canterbury's water resources really well. We've got to really optimise it. We've got to treat it like gold. It's a national asset.
New Zealand's irrigation has come a long way. The traditional way of doing things was to channel water and simply flood the farmland, much as it has been done for thousands of years before. But a lot of water is lost as it seeps into the groundwater or evaporates. The huge irrigators that we see in fields today are much more efficient. But I've come to the Hawke's Bay to find out how two guys, still only 28, have developed the next generation of intelligent irrigation. This story starts back when Bradbury and George Ricketts were still studying at Massey University.
I bought a handheld GPS on Trade Me, just because I thought it looked interesting. I built up a little data logger to log all the points from the GPS, and we started mapping a few farms. That led to development of a mapping program to actually draw up the maps.
The system was simple and allowed farmers to create a perfect map of their land.
So, for example, on this fence line here, we'd go to the fence, hit mark and enter, and that saves the point.
Simple as that?
Yep.
So any farmer could do this?
Yeah, definitely.
They called this where'smycows.com and started selling it as a do-it-yourself kit. After leaving uni, they decided to try and make it a full-time business.
While we were getting that really off the ground, I guess at the end of 2004, we were looking for a bit of extra pocket money. We knew someone that was doing irrigation work, so we started working for them, assembling irrigators. When we'd go out onto a farm to work on an irrigator, you'd see wet areas where crops weren't growing and dry areas where they couldn't get enough water. So we could see the obvious need for being able to specify where you want to apply the water and how much.
These irrigators were applying the same amount of water across a whole field. But of course, fields aren't flat, so water runs from the high parts, leaving it dry, soaking the lower parts. And not all soil is created equal. Light soils drain faster and require more frequent watering. To the farmer, this means less production. So the guys embarked on a quest to develop irrigation that would adapt to the environment.
When we started developing the system, I would have been 22 or 23 years old. We just thought, well, we can do it, so why shouldn't we? And with an engineering and farming background, and with the Kiwi sort of attitude, we thought, let's get into it and see what we can do.
Stu and George are clearly a special team. While Stu takes on the general management of the business, George is the techie genius, toiling in the workshop.
At the time, I don't know, I saw it as a challenge. We saw it as a challenge to try and develop it. And because it was a challenge, we didn't really think about how long it was going to take or how hard it was going to be. We just focused on the end result.
Yeah, George is an interesting character. He always loves a challenge. He's a great mate, and yeah, I don't think anybody knows how George's mind works. It's one of those magic things that you come up with ideas and it comes up with solutions and makes them work.
Finally, in 2006, everything started to come together.
George was working away furiously in his bedroom on his computer trying to program things up, and I was mowing silage, and I got a text message from George probably about 11:30 at night. I was mowing and he was working away, and had some interesting words in it, something along the lines of I finally got it working, and that was a pretty good moment. I almost drove the tractor through a fence and then started concentrating on what I was doing again.
The key to this system is that every nozzle is individually controlled, but how do they know where to spray and where not to? This is done by making an electromagnetic map of the individual fields.
What's your contraption here, Stu?
Okay, so this is the EM sensor. So this is the device that we're going to tow around the field to measure the conductivity of the soil.
Right.
Yep. So all we do is we simply tow it around behind this quad.
Just behind the quad?
Yep. So
What's the other gear on here?
moving up on here, we've got this is called an RTK GPS. The RTK stands for real-time kinematic. It's accurate to within about 2 centimetres.
Is it?
Yep, that's right. So that's going to go on your back, and while that's measuring what the soil conductivity is, this is going to measure where you are.
So I'll just strap this on and go?
That's right, yep.
All right.
That up on there.
Cool.
Chuck your lid on.
So it says always wear a safety helmet.
That's the one, yep.
Just start her up.
Yep, start her up. This will tell you where you've been.
Yeah.
And here we usually go at about 10 or 12 k's an hour, just up and down the field.
All right. See you in the back.
Yep.
It might not look like it, but this electromagnetic sensor is measuring the conductivity and provides a vital clue as to what kind of soil it is and how much water it can hold.
That's a big variation in the soil.
That's right. So up here we've got a terrace with some quite loamy soil up the top, and down here's a river. So we've got old riverbed, and it's very rocky and stony. So here we're seeing much more conductivity up in the terrace with a nice loamy soil that holds a lot of moisture, and down there there's not much moisture at all in the stones.
And what's the blue map here? Why have you changed colours?
From there, we need to take the EM map and convert it to an available water holding capacity map, which is basically the amount of water the soil can hold. Once we have that, we can define different soil zones, which can be then treated individually. So lighter soils can be watered more often, but less amount, and the heavier soils can be watered larger amounts. Yeah.
Not only that, but the irrigator can be shut off over tracks and buildings or over areas that would otherwise be watered twice by overlapping irrigators.
So what does this mean for the farmer on the day?
Okay, so what he's going to do is, with the variable rate system, he will program it up so that, let's say this irrigator here will irrigate all of these areas, and then when these ones come over, nozzles would turn off. So this one up here, for example, would go up, and it'd start turning off here, turning more and more nozzles off, so as this area is not wetted.
So it's a good cost saving.
That's right. In this instance, it's about 5.5 hectares of overlap that he's saving.
The first prototype model was sold to farmer Johnny Fraser in 2008, and he's been reaping the benefits ever since.
Johnny here hadn't actually seen it physically, but he knew all about it, and I came up here to talk to him and say, well, look, we've got this system that you might be interested in, and by the time I walked away, he said, no, you got the wrong end of the stick. I'm having one on this farm, and you're going to have it in ready for me this season. So sure, it was a bit of a rush job, but we got it all in and going, and yeah, the result's been pleasing.
So what does it mean having the new technology from the guys on the farm now?
Oh, just brilliant. Yeah. It means that we can start to even out that yield across the whole paddock. So we're picking up the yield on the lighter parts of the paddock, which were normally suffering from being too dry, and also retaining more of that yield from the heavier parts of the paddock where we were probably doing damage for overwatering.
Right, and this means you're saving water?
Very much so. Depending on what crops are underneath that irrigator, we could be ranging from a 10% water saving through to a 30% water saving.
And what does that mean for the bottom line?
Oh, a 30% water saving is a 30% cut in cost.
In 2010, the turnover of the business was around $500,000, with systems all over the country and also in Australia and the US. The success attracted the attention of US irrigation giant Lindsay Corporation, who'd bought the business in 2011 with Stu and George staying on as managers. So at the tender age of 28, has water made these innovators rich?
No, not quite rich. No, it was it was a good deal, but yeah.
Oh, that's yet to be found out. We won't be sure if we're millionaires. We'll see how the next few years goes and if we manage to make the company any money.
New Zealand water is one of our most valuable resources, crucial for our health and wealth. But our demand is growing rapidly, just as we are becoming aware that the supply may not be as stable in the future.
So we need our scientists more than ever to predict what the future holds and find ways of managing the challenges that are coming our way.